Hello, I'm Nora and welcome back to Novels with Nora. Today I am in a new location. I am trying out a new angle. I know you can see the glare of the window in my glasses. Let me know if that bothers you. I would genuinely like to know. But anyway, if you saw my last video, my goal recap, checking in with how I'm doing with my goals and my reading challenges, you would know that I am this year participating in the r/fantasy bingo challenge. And I wanted to include it at the end of that video, but there are 24 prompts in this reading challenge and I wanted to give it its time to shine. So that's what this video today is. I'm going to be talking through all 24 prompts, the books that I have read or will be reading for those prompts, and then just also hopefully getting some recommendations from the community, because I love watching these videos about other people talking about what books they're reading for these prompts, because every video I watch, someone is reading something different. If not for all of the prompts, at least a few of them. So I'm really happy to be adding to this because I feel like I have some recommendations that maybe you wouldn't have thought of to add, or maybe that you don't even know about. So I'm just happy to be talking about them, and I would love to get some feedback on what you're reading for this challenge if you're participating in the challenge. So first of all, if you're unfamiliar with r/fantasy reading bingo, this is a challenge that I only just recently became familiar with earlier this year, and it was through BookTube that I learned of it. So it is a challenge that comes from the r/fantasy subreddit on Reddit, and they just talk about different like fantasy books, games, movies, shows, anything in the fantasy genre. And they have this reading challenge where it's a bingo board, but you try and fill out the whole board, where each square has a different prompt. And then in each of those prompts, there's like the regular prompt and then a hard mode for that prompt. So it's a super fun challenge, and I really feel like it gets you to read outside of what you typically pick up, and I'm really excited to be participating in it this year. It goes from April of this year to April of next year, so even if you're just learning about it now and you want to participate, there's definitely still time for that because it goes until April of next year. So there's definitely some time because it's a full year long. So I have my iPad here with Storygraph pulled up because I love the feature on Storygraph where someone can host a reading challenge and then people can add books to the prompts. So I have it pulled up on my iPad to be reading the prompts to you. And I have technically already completed 42% of this reading challenge, which is 10 of the 24 prompts, which I feel like is pretty good. You know, I feel like we're doing great. But there are a few where I'm like, does it technically fit that prompt? Yes. Do I feel like there's something else that probably fits better? Also, yes. But in going through, I was like, oh, well, that book fits for that. So we'll just put it there for now. So even the ones where I'll say like, yes, I have already fulfilled this, I do feel like even just in my like regular reading, I'll probably read something that fits the prompt a little bit better. So let's just get right into it and get started with the prompts. So prompt number 1 is Knights and Paladins. One of the protagonists is a paladin or knight. Hard mode, the character has an oath or promise to keep. And this is one of the ones that I have already read, and I read Brighter Than Scale, Swifter Than Flame by Neon Yang, because in this, our main character is a knight. She is a guild knight who like hunts dragons and then slays the dragons. This is a novella, so like it reads really quickly, but it was so wonderful. This is one of my top 5 books of the year so far. So I really love this, and it does fit this prompt perfectly. Like the whole point is that she is a guild knight who hunts these dragons, but then gets confronted with like a moral dilemma of, are the dragons actually something that should be hunted, or should we just like let them exist? And I really enjoyed this, but I will say we're seeing a lot of books coming out this year that have to do with like female knights, and I'm definitely going to be picking up more of them. So I will have several books read by the end of this year that complete this prompt, because another good one for this that I actually didn't bring over here because I completely forgot about it is The Starving Saints by Caitlin Starling, because Sir Voin is a knight and they do have an oath to uphold of needing to protect someone else in the castle. So Starving Saints and Brighter Than Scale, Swifter Than Flame are perfect for this prompt. And they both meet the hard mode for that prompt too, which is super exciting. Now, I will say, for a lot of these, the hard mode is definitely like actually harder. It's not just like, oh, for sure I can do that. It's genuinely like, oh, I don't know what I could even find to fit that. So I will mention that some of them fit the prompt but not the hard mode, and some fit both the prompt and the hard mode. So I'll mention that. Prompt number 2 is Hidden Gem, a book with under 1,000 ratings on Goodreads. New releases and arcs from popular authors do not count. Follow the spirit of the square. Hard mode, published more than 5 years ago. So this, I actually have 3 options. First is Violet Wings, which is a book that I read like in my childhood, and I absolutely loved this book, but it's not very popular. At the time I thought it was a good book, and I do really want to reread it because there is a sequel that I didn't read when I was a kid that I really want to read. So this is my first option. And then there's Escaping 11, which sounds like it's like a dystopian novel, but like came out a little bit more recently. And I do believe that all 3 of these fit the hard mode. But Escaping 11 YA dystopian sounds actually quite interesting. And then Mermaid Moon, which is like a mermaid fantasy, which beautiful cover too. And so I'm really looking forward to reading all of these. They all sound really interesting. I will say Escaping 11 sounds the least interesting, but to find a lot of these books, I went through my Goodreads want to read shelf and just like with the intention of each prompt and looked to see which one would fit. I think that Mermaid Moon and Violet Wings are the 2 that I'm most interested in reading for this, especially like look at the cover of Mermaid Moon. This thing is beautiful, so I'm really interested in reading this. So that is prompt number 2. Prompt number 3 is published in the 80s. Read a book that was first published anytime between 1980 and 1989. Hard mode, written by an author of color. And when I first saw this prompt, I knew exactly what I wanted to read, or exactly who I wanted to read from, and that is Octavia Butler. So my 2 options that I have are Dawn and Wild Seed. These are the 2 that I feel like are most up my alley. And I did forget to mention, it's called r/fantasy. So a lot of what you want to be reading for this challenge are like fantasy sci-fi, but there's also a few like horror prompts, and like horror does fit for a lot of the prompts. So just thought I'd mention that. But yeah, Dawn and Wild Seed are the 2 that I'm most looking forward to reading from Octavia Butler. I want to read like a lot of her books, but these are the 2 that I felt fit best for this prompt and then also came out in this time frame. And then obviously that fits for the hard mode. Prompt number 4 is high fashion. Read a book where clothing/fashion or fiber arts are important to the plot. This can be a crafty main character or a setting where fashion itself is explored. Hard mode, the main character makes clothes or fibers. And I, again, knew exactly what book I wanted to read for this, and that is Spin the Dawn, because I used to own this book and then I got rid of it because I hadn't picked it up in a long time. Like, it had been on my shelf forever and I didn't pick it up, but I am still interested in reading it, so I hope to get to it for this challenge. But then also an author that I've really been wanting to read from, Tessa Gratton, just released The Mercy Makers, which is about this character who like weaves disguises. So I'm not sure how well a lot of these books, and why I think this challenge is so fun, is that a lot of times you don't know if the books fit the prompt until you're actually reading them, because a lot of times the prompts aren't things that you would get from the description or like the synopsis of the book. So this one I feel like could work because she weaves these disguises for people, but I'm not entirely sure because I don't know if that would really be considered like fiber arts or if she's making like clothes. So that one is something that I do want to read. I just don't know if it'll fit for the prompt, but I know that Spin the Dawn will fit. Prompt number 5 is another prompt that I have already completed, and that is Down with the System. Read a book in which a main plot revolves around disrupting a system. Hard mode, not a governmental system. And this is like, the hard mode does make this one significantly harder because there's a lot of, especially like fantasy sci-fi books that have to do with like taking down a corrupt government system. But the book that I actually used to fulfill this prompt is Lucy Undying by Kirsten White, because in this the government's like not really mentioned at all, but they're taking down this like evil pyramid scheme MLM company business model. And it's a super fascinating concept in the book, especially because it has to do with like, it's a vampire novel. So it definitely has like the fantasy sci-fi element, but also it's like this MLM pyramid scheme built on vampirism, which is like super fascinating. And it's about the main character being like the heir to that empire and like trying to take that down. So that one fit really well. And for the hard mode, and I really love that book, so I would highly recommend it. Prompt number 6 is Impossible Places, and this is another one that I have completed. Read a book set in a location that would break a physicist. The geometry, non-Euclidean. The volume, bigger on the inside. The directions, merely a suggestion. Hard mode, at least 50% of the book takes place within the impossible place. Now, for this one, I was originally thinking Wings of Starlight, which is a Pixie Hollow novel, because the pixie dust tree and like just all of Pixie Hollow doesn't like Right. It's not like really like a real space, but then I was like, that feels kind of like cheating. And in like the other prompt mentioned, follow the spirit of the square. So I ended up using Exquisite Ruin for this one because the vast majority, I would say like 90% of this book takes place in this like twisty maze-like labyrinth that kind of just exists in the characters' heads. And like it changes as their emotions change and as their like feelings towards each other change. The maze itself changes and it like isn't a real place. It's kind of like this third dimensional plane that only exists in their heads. It's not even like fully outlined in the book exactly what's happening in this labyrinth, but that fits perfectly for this because it shifts and changes so much. It's not like a physical space. So fits perfectly for the prompt and the hard mode. Number 7 is another prompt I have completed, and that is a book in parts. Read a book that is separated into large sections within the main text. This can include things like acts, parts, days, years, and so on, but has to be more than just chapter breaks. Hard mode, the book has 4 or more parts. And for that, I am using Small Favors by Aaron A. Craig because this is divided into seasons. And so we have the 4 seasons. So 4 or more parts, there are 4. And this was really wonderful because the book spans a whole year. So we get all 4 of the seasons very vividly because Aaron A. Craig's writing is like very immersive, very atmospheric. So getting all the seasons was really wonderful in here, and it completes the prompt perfectly. Next is one of the prompts that I am having the hardest time with, and that I feel like a lot of other people are also having a hard time with, and that is prompt number 8, Gods and Pantheons. Read a book featuring divine beings. Hard mode, there are multiple pantheons involved. And a lot of what I've seen from this is people just being like, I don't know what that would even entail. Like, would it be different religions kind of all coming together? Would it be like, I'm just not sure what that would look like. And I feel like that's the problem that a lot of, not the problem, but I feel like that's a roadblock that a lot of other readers are having. So I have 3 options for this just because I'm not entirely sure what, this is another one where I feel like until you're reading the book, you're not sure exactly what's going to work for the prompt. But I have Gods of Jade and Shadow, City of Dusk, and then Song of the Huntress. So all 3 of these I got from the story graph, like people just putting them in as suggestions as things that they're going to read. So Gods of Jade and Shadow is by Silvia Moreno Garcia, and this one is something that's been on my TBR for a long time. I'm not giving the plots of all of these books because I have multiple books for each prompt, and so we'd be here forever. This is kind of just to give you an idea of what. Also, I have not read most of these books, so I can't give you more than what the description says, you know? So this is, like, this follows our main character, Cassiopeia, which love that name. And she's in southern Mexico during the Jazz Age, which already I'm in. Like, I love reading anything set in the 1920s, especially from a character of color's perspective. So really excited about that. And then City of Dusk is one that I hadn't heard about prior to this, but it says, enter a world of bone and shadow magic, of vengeful gods and defiant chosen ones. And so there's like 4 realms that all have different powers, and then the 4 heirs of those realms have to kind of work together to save their world. Sounds fascinating. And then finally, Song of the Huntress just sounded really interesting. This one I know the least about, and I kind of want to keep it that way, but I know it's based on some kind of mythology. I really know very little about this one, and the synopsis doesn't really give a whole lot either. So I'm gonna go into this one blind, but it was put in the storygraph section for this prompt, so I would imagine it fits, but I'll probably end up reading Gods of Jade and Shadow just because that's one I wanted to read prior to this challenge. Next is prompt number 9, last in a series. Read the final entry in a series. Hard mode, the series is 4 or more books long. And this one, I scoured my brain thinking of what I could read for this, but I'm not in the middle of that many series, so I'd be having to start a series that's 4 or more books long to do the hard mode, and that just feels like more than I'm trying to take on. So the book that I have for this one is The Last Hero by Lyndon A. Lewis. This is the conclusion to the First Sister trilogy. So it's only 3 books, but again, I'd have to start a whole series to get it to be the hard mode. So I'm just not doing the hard mode for this one, but I'm really looking forward to finishing this series. It's like a space opera, really expansive world set all in space. So really has like a really strong sci-fi element, and I'm absolutely loving this, but I do need to reread the first 2 before I go into this one, just because it's very expansive. So much happens in this series that I feel like in order to fully feel the impact of this one, I want to read the first 2 first. So this one would be the last in the series, but not 4 more books. This next prompt was fun to explore, but also kind of challenging, and that is prompt number 10, book club or read-along book. Read a book that was or is officially a group read on r/fantasy. And the hard mode is read and participate in an r/fantasy book club or read-along during the bingo year. So I definitely might do the hard mode, but they haven't announced all of the prompts for the book clubs going through April of next year, so I might end up participating in one. But in the Goodreads, they have it linked to a Goodreads shelf in a Google Sheet of all of the books they've read for like read-alongs and book clubs and things in the R Fantasy Reddit page. So I scrolled through and found some things that were interesting to me. And first is An Unkindness of Ghosts by River Solomon, who is an author I've wanted to read things from before. This is very interesting because it's like a spacecraft that's modeled after the antebellum South. So I'm really curious to see how this works in this novel, but also I know that River Solomon is like a very acclaimed author who's very talented, so I'm really looking forward to reading something from them. And then the second book that I had, because just going through like what they had on their spreadsheets and things, I found The Hunger by Alma Katsu, which is a historical fiction like retelling of the Donner Party, the party that went west in like a covered wagon and ended up like resorting to cannibalism because crazy things happened to them. So again, Alma Katsu is an author I've heard of before and want to read from, so I'm really looking forward to this. So we'll see which of those I end up getting to first, and like I'll probably end up reading both of them anyway, but both of those fit for that prompt. Not for the hard mode because they've already read them, but again, we'll see if I end up getting to that. I'm slowly becoming surrounded by more and more books. But then prompt number 11 is Parent Protagonist. Read a book where a main character has a child to care for. The child does not have to be biologically related to the character. Hard mode, the child is also a major character in the story. Now, this one was hard for me because I don't typically love reading books about parents just because parenthood kind of freaks me out a little. But I do have one that I've technically already started and then soft DNF'd, and that is The Wolf of Oren-Yaro, because this follows our main character who is a mother, and I feel like as the series progresses, her son will become more of a main character because he's like the heir to the kingdom. So, and he's kind of like already a bit of, not a main character, but like he's a background character in here. So I don't know if this necessarily fits for hard mode, but it definitely fits for the prompt. And it's one of the few things that I own and have already started. I'm like 120 pages in before I decided to put it down, just because I just really wasn't in the mood for it at the time, but I do want to come back to it. Now, there is another book that I'm already using for a different prompt, because I just think it fits better there than it does here. But that is A Botanical Daughter, because in this, we have our two main characters who become parents throughout the course of the story. The whole plot of the story is that they're building this daughter for themselves, and the daughter is a main character here. So this one definitely would work, but I'm using it for a different prompt that we will get to eventually. This would also work for hard mode because the daughter that they build becomes a main character in the story. Next is prompt number 12, Epistolary. The book must prominently feature any of the following: diary or journal entries, letters, messages, newspaper clippings, transcripts, etc. Hard mode, the book is told entirely in epistolary format. And this one, I was originally going to use Lucy Undying, because it does feature a lot of different journal entries and then like transcripts from therapy sessions. But then I read The Unworthy, and this is told exclusively through diary entries. It doesn't really seem like it because it's just like one straight through narrative. It's not like June 2nd and then like entries from there. The whole thing is just her diary entries, but it's all diary entries, the whole thing. So this fits for both the prompt and the hard mode, and I absolutely love this book. This is again one of my top 5 books of the year. And it's a novella, so it's quite short, but I absolutely love this because it's told exclusively from diary entries. So we're getting a very like limited worldview of our one character as her entire world that comes unraveling around her. So I really love this one, and it fits perfectly for the prompt and the hard mode for the prompt. Next is prompt number 13, published in 2025. A book published for the first time in 2025. No reprints or new editions. Hard mode, it's also a debut novel, as in it's the author's first published novel. And I have 4 for this because these are all just debut novels that I'm really looking forward to, and they're all things that I'm probably going to read at some point, but they all fit for this because they're all new releases from debut authors. So first is Where Shadows Meet, and this, all I know about this is that it's sapphic vampires. That's kind of all I need to know, especially because I feel like I'm really getting into like my vampire era ever since I read Lucy Undying. So really excited for this one. And then I have Firstborn of the Sun, and I know next to nothing about this other than this is high fantasy inspired by Yoruba culture. I've seen this author on social media, and what the author's posting sucked me in. So that's really all I know about that one. And then I have The Maiden and Her Monster, which this one, again, I don't really know about, but the cover is stunning. And I keep seeing people talk about it, and people seem like really excited about it. So also the main like tagline for this is "The forest eats the girls who wander out after dark." I'm in. Like it's very easy to get me interested in a debut novel, especially because I love supporting debut authors. And then finally I have When Devils Sing. First of all, again, cover stunning. I also know very little about this other than it's like a gothic southern type novel about how powerful and wealthy people feed off of the poor while continuing to get richer, and the poor get poorer. And again, I've seen this author a lot on social media, and I love what they're posting and how they're marketing the book, so really interested in that. And again, all of those fit for hard mode as well. Number 14 is Author of Color. Read a book written by a person of color. Hard mode, read a horror novel by an author of color. So this is, like I said, it's r/fantasy, but there are some horror elements as well. And this is one that I have already completed, and for this I read The Center because this is a horror novel by an author of color. And this follows our main character as she is dating this guy who like miraculously learns how to speak her native language like overnight, almost better than she can. And she's like, how are you doing that? And he's like, there's this place called The Center where you go and you pay this like crazy amount of money and you're there for 10 days, but you come out fluent in a language. And she's like, I'm gonna go because she wants to be a translator. And she realizes that what's happening there is not as academic as you might think. And this was a 5-star read for me. I absolutely loved it. And then going through here, I was like, oh, it fits perfectly for that. So this is, I think, one of the easiest prompts to complete because there are so many horror novels by authors of color. So this one I think is like one of the easiest ones to complete, and I absolutely love this book. So I would highly recommend it for this prompt and just to read in general. Prompt number 15 is small press or self-published. Read a book published by a small press, not one of the big 5 publishing houses or Bloomsbury, or self-published. If a formally self-published book has been picked up by a publisher, it only counts if you read it before it was picked up. Hard mode, the book has under 100 ratings on Goodreads or was written by a marginalized author. And this is another prompt that I have already completed. And for that, I have Dancers of the Dawn by Zuleyka A. Afzal. And this Again, absolutely loved. I read this earlier this year. This was a 4.5 star for me, and I loved it. And it follows our characters who have dance magic. So they all have a different type of magic, but they dance in order to channel their magic and then use it. And it was wonderful. And this was published by Rock the Boat, which is a smaller, I don't want to say indie publishing house, but it's definitely smaller. And it's not one of the big five or Bloomsbury, so it technically counts. And then also it would, I think, count for the hard mode because it is an author of color and she is a woman. So I feel like, right. So again, I just really loved this book and I really wanted to put it in this prompt somewhere so I could talk about it again because I love this book. Prompt number 16 is one that I had kind of a hard time with it just because I wasn't entirely sure what it was. And that is prompt number 16, Biopunk. Read a book that focuses on biotechnology and or its consequences. Hard mode, there is no electricity-based technology. And I didn't know what biopunk was or like biotechnology. I wasn't familiar with that term. And I've seen a lot of the other videos I watched looking specifically for this prompt. They were like, yeah, I'm not entirely sure what fits for this because this one's kind of like a up to your own interpretation. And this is where I ended up putting in a botanical daughter because it's set in like England in the 1800s, so we don't really have a whole lot of technology as it is, but then also our main characters use like plant matter to grow their daughter and they like create life out of plants, and I feel like that fits, right? I feel like that really works for here because especially they're creating new life forms out of these plants. That feels like biotechnology to me. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. But before I knew that that one fit and like had that realization, I was going to use The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett just because I've seen a lot of other people talking about it and using it for this prompt. And also one of my favorite booktubers, Riley Marie, she read it and really loved it. So I was like, okay, I'll give it a try. But this prompt is technically complete for me because Botanical Daughter, in my mind, does fit the prompt. Number 17 is Elves and or Dwarves. Read a book that features the classical fantasy archetype of elves and or dwarves. They do not have to fit the classic tropes, but must be either named as elves and or dwarves or be easily identified as such. Hard mode, the main character is an elf or a dwarf. And this one was really hard for me because I couldn't find anything that had to do with this, especially with the main character being one of these creatures, because this is another thing where I feel like unless it is specifically outlined in the synopsis, you don't know about that until you start reading the book. But I did end up finding one book that very clearly outlines that the two main characters are elves because the synopsis says two elven sisters. There we go, right? And that is Feybound. And this is one that I am like kind of interested in reading, but it's not really something that I would pick up outside of this challenge just because it's a fae story and I don't really typically enjoy fae stories, but I would like to give more of them a try and try them outside of like the romantasy genre. And I do feel like this one kind of falls into there a little bit, but I am still interested in picking it up, especially because it's the only thing that I found that I was even remotely interested in for reading this prompt. So we'll see. If you have any other recommendations for this, I would love to read more like high fantasy that have these characters in it, but I couldn't really find anything, especially because, as I'm sure you can tell, I'm trying to prioritize reading female authors because I feel like the fantasy space has been traditionally and historically dominated by men, and so trying to then prioritize reading female fantasy authors. So if you have any recommendations on that, this is one that I would love your help with. Number 18, LGBTQIA Protagonist. This was another one that was super easy for me. Read a book where a main character is under the LGBTQIA plus umbrella. Hard mode, the character is marginalized on at least one additional axis. And this one, I had so many options that I could use, but I ended up going with A Dark and Drowning Tide by Allison Saft because this one also completes the hard mode. But our two main characters here, it's a sapphic relationship. They're both sapphic, so it fits for there. And then also our one character, Lorelai, is also marginalized for her religious identity and her like cultural identity because her character is based on Jewish culture. So she fits for both the hard mode and the regular prompt. So again, I had so many options that I could pick for this one, and I'll probably end up reading more before the year's out. But this is the one that I've read so far that fits the hard mode as well as the regular prompt. Prompt number 19 is 5 sci-fi fantasy short stories. Any short sci-fi fantasy story, as long as there are 5 of them. Hard mode, read an entire sci-fi fantasy anthology or collection. And this one was a little bit harder for me to find because I don't typically pick up anthologies or short story collections, but one of my favorite booktubers is Books and Lala, and she reads a lot of short story collections, so I have 2 added here that I am interested in. The first is more of a horror short story collection, it seems, and that is Odd Body because it is described specifically as having like a lot of like body horror short stories. And then one that I have actually started reading but then ended up having to return to the library and never went back to is Out There by Kate Folk. And this is one that I was enjoying it while I was reading it, but then because I returned it, I just never went back to it. And this one is sci-fi fantasy specifically. So I'm interested in both of these, and they both have like relatively high ratings, at least in my opinion. So I'm interested in reading both of those. We'll just see which one ends ends up getting read first and then gets getting counted for this challenge. We're getting to the end now. You see why I didn't want to tack this onto the end of my last video? Prompt number 20 is Stranger in a Strange Land. Read a book that deals with being a foreigner in a new culture. The character or characters, if they are a group, must be either visiting or moving as a minority. Hard mode, the main character is an immigrant or refugee. And I was originally going to use the Ashfire King for this, but then when I put it in, it wasn't working, and I was like, because I read it before April. So before this challenge technically started, but that one would work. I think both the Stardust Thief, which is the first book, and then the Ashfire King, which is the sequel, would work for this, because in the first book, Kadir, who is a djinn, is living in the mortal realm, and so he technically is a minority or a refugee there because his world is like collapsing. And then in the second book, the Ashfire King, they are in the djinn realm, so all of the humans are technically refugees from what's happening in the human realm, and they're like discovering this new strange magical land. So both of those I think would fit for that prompt, but I read them before April, so they didn't work for me. So a book that I do plan on reading later this year is the Jasad Heir, because this follows our main character whose people were completely wiped out, but she is like the heir of her kingdom, and now she is living in like enemy territory as a refugee, trying to just like stay under the radar until she gets discovered, and then has to contend with kind of working with her enemy to save her people. So would also work for the hard mode, and something that I was really looking forward to reading. Sarah Hashem, the author, was the host for an event that a virtual event that I did with Chelsea Abdullah, and she's just like, they're both such fun authors that I want to read everything that they publish, so I'm really looking forward to getting to that one. Prompt number 21 is recycle a bingo square. Use a square from a previous year as long as it does not repeat one on the current card, as in you can't have 2 book club squares. Hard mode, not very clever of us, but do the hard mode for the original square. And in reading through all of the previous year's bingos, I was having such a fun time seeing what they put together for the previous bingo boards, but there was one that I was really drawn to, and that was a prompt from, I think, 2024 or 2023, I don't fully remember, but it was about having multiple perspectives in a novel, and then the hard mode was having more than 4 like perspective characters in the novel. And for that, I've actually completed it, and that I used Spells for Forgetting by Adrienne Young, because I don't remember exactly how many perspectives there were, but there were so many. And then the audiobook had 9 narrators, and each character had their own narrator, so I'd imagine we had at least 9 perspectives in here. And I really enjoyed this novel, and this one fits very well for that challenge, because 9, I don't think you're gonna find many more than that, you know? Especially because we had like 2 main characters, and then like the side characters who like had pieces of the puzzle were also perspective characters. So I really actually enjoyed this, and having a different narrator for each character was really wonderful. So I highly recommend this if you're going to do that prompt, but also if you just want a fun audiobook, this one is perfect for that. Prompt number 22 is cozy sci-fi fantasy. Cozy is up to your preferences for what you find comforting, but the genre typically features relatable characters, low stakes, minimal conflict, and a happy ending. Hard mode, the author is new to you. And I actually own something that I think would fit perfectly, and that is Can't Spell Treason Without T. It even says here, a cozy fantasy steeped with love, and it's by Rebecca Thorne, who I've never read from before. I don't know if this is a debut novel or not, but I've never read anything from her. It has beautiful sprayed edges, and I also believe this is sapphic. So I'm really looking forward to reading this, especially because I feel like I don't know that I've ever read a cozy fantasy, but it sounds super fun, and I'm really looking forward to reading this, especially I feel like in the fall, I think this will be a perfect fall read. And like, just look at the cover. They look super cozy, so I'm really looking forward to reading that one. Prompt number 23 is generic title. Read a book that has one or more of the following words in the title: blood, bone, broken, court, dark, shadow, song, sword, or throne. Plural is allowed. Hard mode, the title contains more than one of the listed words, or contains at least one word and a color, number, or animal, real or mythical. And originally I was going to go with The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart, because this is the first thing that I thought of, but only bone is the only word that, I've said bone so many times, bone is the only word that is in their list that counts, so this wouldn't count for hard mode. But then I realized that so it would work, just not for hard mode. And then I realized that I have 5 Broken Blades, which would work for hard mode because it has broken and a number, so it would work for hard mode. And I am interested in reading both of these. I own both of them, and we'll probably get to them at some point. Again, just a matter of which one I get to first, and if I want to say that I did hard mode for this prompt. Prompt number 24 is a bonus prompt, and it's not actually a book. Do something new besides reading a book. Watch a TV show, play a game, learn how to summon a demon. Okay, maybe not that last one. Spend time with fantasy, science fiction, or horror in another format. Movies, video games, tabletop role-playings, board games, etc. all count. There's no rule about how many episodes of a show will count or whether or not you have to finish a video game. New is the keyword here. Hard mode, write and post review to the r/fantasy Reddit page. So this one, I obviously don't have a recommendation for you, but I feel like there's a lot of things you can do. Like, it listed a whole bunch of things. So I'm probably going to try out watching a new show or a movie. So we'll see. I kind of want to watch that new movie K-pop Demon Hunters. I'm not sure. I feel like that would count as sci-fi, and that's something that's like very much out of my comfort zone because like I'm not like a big K-pop fan or anything, but I keep hearing the music from it and like I really love the animation style. I'm a big fan of animated movies, so I think that's what I'm gonna do for this. So that's my suggestion. I love watching movies, but I just don't do it as often as I would like to. So I think that is gonna be what I do for this one. And then the final prompt number 25, pirates. Read a book where characters engage in piracy. Hard mode, not a seafaring pirate. And this is one that was tripping me up because I was like, again, how do you know? Like, I feel like that's not usually in the description unless they're like actual pirates. So for this one, that does not meet the hard mode prompt. I have The Adventures of Amina El-Sarafi because this one, she is a pirate. And this does sound super interesting. She's like, she was a pirate, but now she's retired, but then like gets pulled back into this like grand scheme. But I was also thinking that The Last Hero, I think, would technically work for this because they're like space pirates, some of the characters, where they like steal from wealthy corporations. So kind of like a Robin Hood situation more than piracy maybe, but I feel like this would technically work. But because this is like one of the only series that I'm in the middle of, I'm going to use it for that prompt. But if you're looking for something else, I think this whole series would technically work. I think. I am not the expert on pirates, so I couldn't say for sure, but I do think that that one would work. So those are my recommendations for that. I would love more recommendations for like space pirates. That sounds cool. I really love reading books set in space. I feel like that would work really well for me. So if you have any recommendations on that, I would love to know. But that brings us to the end of all of the 25 prompts. So I am really looking forward to participating in this. I have a lot of really great books that I'm looking forward to reading, and I'm really excited that most of them are things that I own and I'm already interested in prior to this challenge, so that I'm not just reading things just to fill the prompts. You know, that's one big thing that I really like to focus on when I'm doing reading challenges, is not just to read a book just because it fits the prompt, but because I'm already interested in it and it fits the prompt. So I would love to know if you are participating in r/fantasy bingo this year. I would love to know what you're reading for some of these more challenging prompts. And otherwise, I hope that you enjoyed this video, maybe got some suggestions for things to read, and we'll stick around for another video soon. Bye!